Hi, I'm Casey Ramos, and I'm here with David Ehrman to discuss the book Abina and the Important Men, A Graphic History by Trevor R. Getz and Liz Clark. So, throughout the semester, we've read many texts written or influenced by slaves. In many instances, there is a common theme in which slaves assert their humanity. And if you can recall, in Aluda Equiano's narrative, he discusses a time when his sister was forced from his arms and how deeply it upset him. Comparable to many of the slave narratives we have read over the course of this semester, Abina and the Important Men employs a similar approach. On the bottom of page 41, there is an image of the slave women holding hands and crying at night when they laid down to sleep. What do you believe the illustrator's intention was in including this image of the women crying? What effect do you believe it has on the greater purpose of this graphic history?
Well, this is probably intended to show the readers that the slaves were humans, and like other humans, they cry and have emotions. The graphic history uses this for the purpose that they want the audience to have sympathy for Abina, so when the court decision is made, they have a strong opinion on her.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard for someone to continue treating an individual so poorly once they recognize that the individual does have human emotions. The authors definitely empathized with Abina and tried to get the readers to do the same. We've also discussed womanhood and marriage in the 19th century. We talked about how in order to be considered a real woman, you had to get married, have, and raise children. We also considered the numerous purposes for marriage throughout time. This theme of marriage is also present in Abina and the Important Men. In this graphic novel, we see marriage as a sort of system rather than the celebration it is viewed as today. Abina discusses her previous marriage to Yowawa and her objection of marriage to Tondo. Abina declares, "I will not marry Tondo. I will not be made to marry anyone. I'm sick of being told what to do." What do each of her marriages stand for? And in what way could marriage be viewed as a system in Abina and the Important Men?
Her marriages have stood for her being used by her so-called husbands as a laborer for whatever they needed her to do. And in this Abina and the Important Men, marriage is viewed as a system that has women used as labor, and it shows that males have complete control over the females during this entire time period.
So, it seems that people throughout history are very quick to refute any claim that humans around the world are being enslaved. Many people are turning a blind eye to the horrific truth. Many public officials berate the concept of slavery, yet traditional caste systems, intertribal abductions, underage sex workers, and child laborers are omnipresent. Similarly, in Abina and the Important Men, many of the individuals that are part of the trial attempt to disprove the fact that Abina Mansaw is enslaved, even though she was beaten and referred to as a slave. On page 68, Thomas Amanissa alludes to a definition of slavery when he says, "Did he not feed her and clothe her? Certainly he disciplined her, but was she not disobedient?" What role does this definition of slavery play in Abina's case? Even if one doesn't meet the criteria of this definition of slavery in today's society, could they truly be considered a free individual?
Well, first off, I don't believe that this is a valid definition of slavery. Being fed and clothed is not enough to be considered a free individual, and there's never a reason to be disciplined the way that Abina was, and she wasn't even being disobedient. So it's not a valid definition of slavery.
Right, and what would you say classifies someone as a free individual?
In my opinion, a free individual would be someone that has inalienable rights, like those given by Thomas Jefferson and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. For Jefferson, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were important, and for Rousseau, life, liberty, and the right to own property. Both of those basically going to the same ideals. And that's what truly makes someone a free individual, someone that can pursue their own dreams, someone that has the rights to go about what they want to do, and someone that could have a way of happiness, which all of those were taken away from Abina. She didn't have a good life because she was being treated the way she was, whether or not you consider it slavery. She couldn't own property, nothing of the like.
There was even a part in the book where she was like that she didn't even have her own free will, so she couldn't be considered free.
That's very true.
And finally, on page 75, the authors of Abina and the Important Men reveal some of the flaws of how history gets passed down through the generations. They explain how the perspectives of minorities aren't usually heard, many documents are lost, only some materials are considered important enough to write about, and how only some histories are chosen by the powerful to be on the list of great books that are widely read. Sutherland discusses this similarly in terms of the classic. He states that the classic is a category that defines what we regard as culturally important. Slave narratives such as Abina Mansaw's story have recently started to be thought of as culturally important, even though they are still not considered classic. Histories like Abina's are often lost in transition since voices such as hers weren't dominant but dominated. Why isn't Abina's story considered a classic? Despite the hard obstacles Abina faced to be heard, do you believe her efforts were effectively communicated? And why is it important to read histories such as this?
It's not considered a classic because at the time period, the tragedy of Abina Mansa was not important to England. No, I don't think her obstacles had much of an effect on the course of history, so that's also probably why it's not considered a classic. And I think it's important to read histories like this because it carries on the life of those that have passed and gives a voice to those that were never heard.
Very true. I think we can both agree that Abina's story is one worth hearing.
Thank you for having me.